I'm Krista, I'm here with Seamus, and we're here to make you a better landlord. All right, Seamus, I've got something a little bit different for you today than our usual back and forth.
All right.
The White House just released a statement about the residential rental industry. Have you had a chance to read through it?
All right. I saw the headlines. Did I read through it? No, definitely not. But I must admit, anytime I see a headline around something like protecting renters, it's hard for me not to feel a little bit triggered that there may be something in there that makes it harder for me to run my business as a landlord. Tell me that's not the case, please.
I would tell you that even if you weren't my boss.
Okay.
Yes, good news is that this statement is really not a big move in either direction. This is just a brief cap on a statement they've released earlier in the year about the Renters' Bill of Rights.
Okay.
So the latest statement from the current administration has three focuses. One of them applies to all landlords, and then the other two are going to be specific for our Section 8 landlords who are watching.
Okay.
The administration is focusing on accuracy of tenant screening reports. The ones that specifically apply to Section 8 landlords or other folks who are participating in housing programs are funding for tenant outreach and education, and then longer or more established eviction timelines for those tenants in these programs.
Okay.
So let's start with the one that applies to everyone, which is accuracy in screening reports. I bet you can understand why that's important, but is there anything that comes to mind when I say that that's going to be a focus here?
Well, I think in general, screening reports are absolutely key to me evaluating tenants. And so accuracy is super important. Definitely don't want to accept or deny someone because of an inaccurate screening report.
Absolutely. And that is what this focus aims to preserve. So it comes into play as follows. When you go through your tenant screening process, you've actually pulled a report, you've evaluated the person based on their trade lines, their credit score, etc.
Yep.
You then have to notify them if you don't move forward. It is a law. It's always been a law.
Okay.
That notification is called the adverse notice letter. If you use TurboTenant, as I know that you do, we send that on your behalf. So you don't have to worry. It basically just details that you've turned them away and that they have a right to request a copy of their screening report to go through and look for any inaccuracies or misreportings that they can then pursue to be corrected.
And can I share what I love about the fact that TurboTenant does that for you?
Absolutely.
You should never ghost tenants. If somebody applies to your property, let them know whether or not they have it or don't have it. And then B, what I really like is in that adverse notice that is sent to the tenant, it tells them exactly how to get that screening report. And guess what? It's not come to me for it because I don't have a responsibility to give it to them. TransUnion actually, who produced that screening report, has a responsibility to give them a copy and to work with them to figure out any sort of accuracies. So it's really nice, honestly, to get outside of the line of fire for that conversation as the landlord and move on with the tenants I did select and start the move-in process.
Exactly. So by making sure that that letter is sent, whether using our software or something else, you are really returning power to the applicant so that they can pursue whatever changes they need to make and you don't have the headache attached.
Yep.
Right? This focus from the White House is just saying, make sure you're sending that adverse notice letter. Because unfortunately, oftentimes renters don't receive that notice. And with the rise in algorithms helping the tenant screening process for larger industrial-sized landlords, these kind of inaccuracies can really damage a person's ability to find housing. If you report to them and let them know that they have this right, they can then pursue it on their own. You don't have to stress. In other words, your process does not have to change.
Perfect. Love to hear that. Not nearly as scary as the headline I read.
Exactly. And similarly, the other two focuses, which are really for landlords in Section 8 programs or other affordable housing programs, are also not going to be wave shakers. They're going to be things that most landlords are already doing, but it's good to have a reminder to keep these practices in place.
Okay.
So first we'll start off with the eviction timelines. That one gets scary. Nobody likes an eviction. It's painful on all sides. So when I say, hey, they're looking to lengthen the amount of notice you have to give to a tenant before you evict them, your reaction is?
Well, especially coming out of the COVID moratorium, it's,
Yeah, that's a lot of people's reaction. But luckily, the actual language in the statement is not that scary.
Okay.
In fact, they're just saying, hey, we know that typically the U.S. Department of Public Housing and Authority, they don't mandate that you give people 30 days notice if they're in Section 8 before you evict them. We would now like to mandate that. We now want to make sure that people have at least 30 days notice before they're evicted. That gives them a chance to pay rent that they're missing or otherwise have conversations with their landlord and hopefully prevent an eviction. Because like I said, it's painful on all sides, it's costly on all sides. So whatever we can do to mitigate that and still make sure everyone is made whole is good news in my book.
So really they're just codifying a best practice in the first place of giving 30 days for an eviction if you're working within a public housing voucher program. Okay.
Exactly. So nothing has to change because the standard is 30 days. Most people follow that. This is just making sure that all people follow that.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Beautiful. And the very last focus is just additional funding for tenant outreach and education.
Okay.
So they're going to pour $10 million into this fund so that tenants can use it and have better relationships with their landlords.
Well, I don't see much harm in that. Makes sense.
Makes sense to me too. And again, that's specifically for tenants who are in affordable housing programs that are publicly funded. So that won't impact everyone, just a select group, but a sizable portion of our audience, so it's still worth talking about.
Absolutely. Well, I got to say, after this conversation, I feel a lot better about what's been proposed. I think the other piece of this, right, is it was just a statement. So there's still a process that has to go through to become a actual law or legislation. What can our community and honestly myself do to keep up to date on changes as this goes through the legislation process?
Well, I can assure you that I will be following up on this. I think it's really interesting to see how things progress. So stay tuned, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to The Key, which is the weekly newsletter that we write here at TurboTenant. We'll be keeping you up to date on the latest legislation on a national level.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Krista. Appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. If you have any questions about this latest statement from the White House, the Renters' Bill of Rights, or anything else, please leave a comment down below. And don't forget to subscribe.